But I get the easy bit of simply welcoming you all to Dartmouth House. It's nice to see some members here. We're a lifeblood of the English Speaking Union. So thank you for coming. For those of you who've never been to Dartmouth House before, you're especially welcome to this beautiful heritage listed building. And also a huge special welcome to London Music Masters. It's fantastic to have you here. I think when we've really been trying to put together a list of exciting events to hold here at the English Speaking Union, one of the things we've really been looking for is some synergy with those events. And I think a lot of the things that London Music Masters does in enabling opportunity and diversity through classical music shows a lot of synergy with what the English Speaking Union does, with us doing it more through communication, public speaking and debating. And with that in mind, it's fantastic that this event can be held here. Fantastic this event can be held here tonight because many do view Dartmouth House very much as the home of public speaking and debating. And there's certainly been some very famous people who've far more fluent and articulate than I who've argued the point in this very room. So, as I say, fantastic to have you here. Very fitting to have you here. Members, welcome. Those who are new, please come back. Please come and find out what the English Speaking Union is about. This year, I think we've been into just over 450 schools, taking our programs also to places like Refugee Society, and really looking to try and see if we can use public speaking and communication as a way of enabling opportunity in schools. And I know that that is something with classical music that the music masters are doing. So a very huge welcome. And now if I could pass over to Tom, who can explain more for the rest of the evening.
Thank you, James. Thank you all of you for being here. So welcome to this debate discussion, class, race and classical music, hosted by London Music Masters. Now, whilst we have an extremely illustrious panel who we'll hear from for the next half hour, 40 minutes or so, this is really absolutely about your discussion as much as ours. So there will be many questions from the floor, I hope, so keep all of that, keep everything stored up just for a little bit and then we'll get things going in due course. So our panellists then, your panellists, Rob Adediran, who's the Executive Director of London Music Masters, violinist Tai Murray, and the novelist and political and cultural commentator Candace Allen. Another round of applause for your panel, ladies. The things were, this topic tonight cuts across, obviously, class, race and classical music, but that is going to take us, I know, into areas of politics and music education above all. There's no better person to kick off tonight's debate than Candace Allen, whose recent book, Soul Music, The Pulse of Race and Music, deals with a worldwide perspective on these issues. Candace is going to talk to us for 10 minutes from that lecture, and then she'll sit down and the rest of us will have a go. So, Candace Allen.
Hello, it's wonderful to see so many friendly faces. My thanks to London Music Masters for organising and the English Speaking Union for hosting this evening's forum. As suggested, I'm not a musician, though my indulgent cello teacher is sitting out there. And I'm not a musicologist. Rather, someone who loves this music and has had the privilege of listening from a number of unique vantage points. So for me, a bit of context. Such emotional words, race and class. At their mere mention, some get aggressive, some defensive, some feign boredom, some wish they would just go away. I certainly do. The myths and reality of race have dominated a good part of my life, and I, like most people, would like them to just stop. But particularly in societies such as ours, the only way this can happen is via mutual empathy and forensic honesty in all regards, keeping wilder emotions in check as much as possible. I've seen the questions at hand parsed as, why is classical music so hideously white? Hideously. Really? What possible purpose can that word serve, save to stir up emotions and attract cheap attention? But such grandstanding aside, we can contemplate why and in what spirit the question is being asked. Is it, why aren't these people of darker color or working class scrambling to become the level of civilized exemplified by this music? Don't they realize that it's the highest incarnation of human creativity, in comparison to which that stuff they're so attached to is common trash? Don't they understand that music, with a capital M, should be far more than distracting entertainment? Or, wow, if they don't think the music is the best and essential to the quality of their lives, is it a rejection of us? Or is it consciously, subconsciously, of European supremacy? How do we change their minds? Do we want to? Or better to let them stay down there in the depths where possibly they belong? Or is it we want to share something wonderful with you, and we know that we can bring as much to it, that you can bring as much to it as you might gain? We love this music, and we don't want it to go the way of the Shakers, who created much of beauty, but pledged to celibacy, have all but died out. This music is not sacrosanct museum. It is a still evolving, living thing that has always benefited from cross-pollinations. We welcome you. Remain yourselves. It will add to the feast. We will feed one another. This is a big difference. There's a big difference between these attitudes, and this difference matters. A few years ago, I decided to investigate whether or not some of the young people involved in the Western classical music as salvation projects, such as Venezuela's El Sistema and Soweto's Cascade, and a music school founded by a charter Palestinian member of the West Eastern Divan, were burdened with the same conflict of our music versus their music that had dominated much of my musical life. And, veteran of the cultural wars that I am, was genuinely surprised to find that they weren't. What I learned was that where life is being lived closer to the edge of survival, folk don't care where their joy comes from. They grab it, hold it close, celebrate where it takes them. For Al-Kamanjali founder Ramzi Abu Redwan, the literal poster child of the First Intifada, who grew up in a refugee camp and lost both his father and a brother to the conflict, all music is without nationality. It is simply sound. You find that which appeals and follow it, inhabit it without concern for its origin. He established his school to gift the children of his community with an energy that contends with persisting anger, in his words, like purifying water. But in the UK and the US, aren't Venezuela, Palestine, the Congo, or Soweto. Here and there, the situation is less starkly dramatic in regards to physical life and death. Perhaps because there's more energy and space to assess its weight, the cultural baggage hanging about classical music is more burdensome, much of it a consequence of class and racial stereotypes that have often characterized empire. The we are superior position. We are civilization. You and your arts are of the body, of the mundane, and not of the mind. Much energy has been expended in divesting both the US and the UK of these archaic attitudes. For cultural pride and independence is as important as physical and political freedom, and shrugging off imperial yokes. But the legacy of these attitudes lingers, and it has much to do with the reality that despite the headache, sometimes raucous carnival attracting folks of all description that has been evolving in the lobby of the Royal Festival Hall, the audience taking their seats for classical concerts in the hall itself are persistently traditional, that is, older, non-working class, and white. We know, however, that class and race aren't the only factors. In addition to state education systems that utterly devalue the importance of the arts and community and individual welfare, where you're not going to hear, let alone learn about, music other than the generally commercial soundtrack out there in the rest of your life, where often learning is something to be suffered through rather than celebrated. There are a lot more choices for diversion here and in the US than there are in Venezuela or Palestine. We've also developed a public culture which, as well as marginalizing so-called classical music in all kinds of ways, celebrates instant gratification over contemplation. In addition, regardless of race and class, a good many people look upon music as a release from everyday trials and cares, delivering fun as well as exaltation. Money is tight, time is limited. Do they really want to spend it locked in a protocol that frowns upon audience movement, let alone exuberance, other than at designated intervals they neither know nor care about. A fairly recent development, this notion of concert hall as temple of silent worship, which appeals to much of the classical core audience, even as it alienates others. It's not going away. And those who wish to experience music in this manner and relish its exclusivity are entitled to continue. But that it's a hurdle to broader audience development is without question. So God bless those spirited ambassadors like the Age of Enlightenment Orchestra with its night shifts, playing in pubs and clubs where headbanging rock might have been the normal fare, and the young woman I just read about who's bringing chamber concerts into some of New York's trendy restaurants downtown, who are demonstrating that musical contemplation needn't take place in a straitjacket. God bless musicians like Matthew Barley, Joshua Redmond, and the Kronos Quartet, composers like Paul Gladstone Reed, Lucas Ligeti, and Gabriel Prokofiev, who are continually pushing against artificial boundaries of genre, exploring and developing musical cross-pollination, who are embracing rather than exclusionary. This is the real future. But what I observed in my very unscientific sampling was that, aided and abetted by the technical revolution, for the majority of young people serious about music, either as listeners or as producers, boundaries, categories, arbitrary exclusions were unimportant, ignored, and pointedly upended. Living music, cause for celebration. As are organizations like London Music Masters, our organizers, and East London's Advanced Network, also represented here, who are dedicated not only to introducing, but comprehensively supporting young people outside the traditional catchments of classical music study, to its benefits, discipline, and wonder. For as we all know, the decision, despite all exterior noise and wisdom to the contrary, that this is my music, this sound is my sound, this is the way I want to tell my story, explore all levels of consciousness, and plumb the deepest depths of the universe, is but the beginning. For those coming from homes and or communities unfamiliar with this world, in addition to focused, sophisticated tuition, decent instruments, and informed guidance, every step of the way, is the willingness to be a pioneer. Like the glorious Chichi Wanaku, sitting out there in the audience, like my co-panelists, Tai Murray and Rob Adediran, and the strength to withstand the pressures of being one of the very few, if not the only one of their background at any given conservatoire or ensemble, of becoming comfortable with the reality that regardless of racial or class difference, those who share a love of and are dedicated to this music are as much their people as members of their own family. For these young people are really the answer. Just as I witnessed peasant toddlers listening quietly to Mahler in Caracas, because this was the music of an older sibling, and therefore theirs as well. These young people will bring their family and friends into the sanctuary. It will be a trickle to begin, and it will take time. But once they're in, they'll know that the music is its own force, its own open kingdom. Anyone can be there and flourish. You don't need to know or analyze its nuts and bolts. You don't have to like it all and stop liking other things. Just be open. Allow it to get into your soul. It will take you.
Thank you, Candace. That opens up a whole universe of possibility for your next talk. Thank you hugely. Rob, just your response from your own perspective, especially as Executive Director of the London Music Masters. I mean, in a sense, the challenge there is how, to use Candace's words, you allow the music to now become to become part of people's soul. So how are you doing that, and what are the challenges that you see?
Thanks, Tom. First of all, it's just a really nice moment to say thank you all for coming. I know it's been said already, but on behalf of London Music Masters, it's great to see so many of you here. Lots of old friends, and hopefully some new ones as well. And Candace, that was a really beautiful way to open. Thank you for that. Really thought-provoking and delightful. So London Music Masters has been in existence for kind of 6 years now, and these issues of race and class and classical music are really part of our DNA. We work in inner city schools, working with a whole range of children from a wide range of backgrounds, and diversity is a word that we like to use because diversity it's inclusive. It means that you can be white working class, to use that label, or you can be from a black community, or you can be wealthy or from a middle class community. It's inclusive, and inclusivity is important, and we feel that drawing people alongside what we're doing and saying to them, we're fascinated by what we do, what you do, come and learn a bit about what we do, and perhaps we can go on a journey together. That for us, that inclusivity is really important. But to be slightly more practical, we practically work in inner city schools. So we work in schools in Lambeth and Westminster currently, working with hundreds of children every week. And one of the things that we're really interested in is development of skills. And saying to these young people, you are talented, because all children, all people have innate musical talent within them, we believe. And what we can do to support that is to give you some time and some of our expertise and a context to explore your innate musicality. So we're really interested in skill development. We work with the children kind of 3 or 4 times a week. They learn to play musical instruments in small groups. They're part of ensembles. They go on trips to hear the London Philharmonic Orchestra play. They engage with students at the Royal College of Music, and it's a very kind of broad experience for them. But at the heart of it, we're saying, be ambitious about your future. Engage with this music. Go and see Tai Murray at Wigmore Hall. Be inspired by her, and then feel like you can be part of that story as well. So one of the things that I want to look at and converse with you all about today is, how do we develop skills? Is it enough as arts organisations and institutions to say, come to my concert and see how great the music is, it's great that we've got a diverse audience, is that enough? Or do we want to be saying, actually, you can be participants, this can be part of your future? So I want to look at the role that conservatoires have to play. I also want to challenge us as an industry, classical music industry, to say, are we afraid of being popular? Popular is very similar to a word populist, which I know we are afraid of. We don't like populism. But is popularity something which we've shied away from to our detriment? And I also want to talk about something else, but I've forgotten. So I'm sure that will come out in the wash.
Thank you, Rob. That's already fantastic articulate. Tai, your perspective.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's heartwarming to me to see this group of people here that at the very least find this subject, this discussion interesting, but hopefully more than that, find it important. Because there's a very direct reason why I want to be here. I am an ambassador for London Music Masters, and I'm very honored to be, because it plays a vital role in providing young children, and as they get older also, something to hold on to in their lives besides perhaps violence or just laziness. It gives them a tool to use in their lives, and that happens to be music. Music is very important, and I think it very important because music has informed my life and informed the way that I am able to live my life. And so that is the reason I want to be here. The reason that I am wanted here is because of the way that I look. There are 2 words, which I will not give power to in the moment, that are usually attached to the beginning of my name as a way of qualifying who I am and what I do. And those 2 words by them separately are important words. They can also be banal words. They can also be just white noise. But when they're put together in front of my name as a way of qualifying who I am, it makes it difficult for me as a musician, and I find myself caught. I usually become like the pupil inside of a socio-political storm iris, which fortunately for me, I have the music to use to escape from that. When I am standing on stage playing, or in a room by myself playing, I am not thinking about, well, what would society think of me? That is the furthest thing from my mind. It really is about, I love what I do. I love playing this music. And so that's why I spend so many hours on the violin. That said, however, when the violin gets put down, I come from a very progressive, a very outspoken family. So when the violin gets put down, I would like to continue that tradition of being outspoken and being progressive. And so I really, I have no problem, saying sometimes, well, that just makes me feel marginalized. I'd just like to share a small anecdote. I recently was on my way to a hall for a sound check. And I walked up to the stage door to ring the doorbell so they could let me in. And as I was standing there, another person, this very nice man, walked up. We started chatting. And he said, "Oh, that's nice to meet you. Oh, and you must be here, you must be a cleaner." And the reaction that you're having now, I didn't even have. Why didn't I have that reaction? Because it actually made sense what he said. Why wouldn't it? Then 10 minutes later, I walked, I'm in the hall. I walk onto the stage with my violin in hand, and the stage manager is out there cleaning the piano, which I thought was very cute, actually. And he asked me, "Oh, why are you here? There's someone who's having a rehearsal now. You're in the wrong place." And I said, "Oh, it's me. My name is so-and-so, and I'm here to do this." And he said, "Oh, I thought you were going to be a singer." And so within the space of 20 minutes, two people it wasn't even that they were judging me, that was the problem. They weren't judging me, they were judging what they thought I should be. So sometimes when I am not seen, but seen through the haze of what I can or should do, that is why the music becomes like this haven for me. I mean, not only, but that's partly why. Because there should be no reason that I couldn't be whatever I wanted to be. And going back to the educational part of things, how can we tell children that they can be anything or do anything if we don't believe it ourselves as adults in our own society? Our own society is teaching us, you look a certain way, you do a certain thing. And we have to be able to change within us, because children are very discerning. They are very empathetic. They don't realize it, but they can tell when someone is just lying to them. They know, they can feel it. And so they grow up to be cynical and disbelieving. And we have to give them that hope. We have to give them that belief. We have to give them the tools, but the tools from within inside us to be able to be successful. So for me, it's the topic within all of these topics is the societal thing, that we have a responsibility to these children to not just teach them, but to also really believe in them and have expectations for them.
Thank you. Candace, did you, in your travels around everywhere from jazz to South Africa, Venezuela to the rap rock, did you ever face, from whatever perspective, the feeling that the music that children were being exposed to, the classical music, was not their music? Was there ever a feeling from them that actually there was this problem? In other words, exactly the problem that I've been talking about from the child's perspective.
Absolutely never. That this was their music. This was their music, and everybody, the Venezuelans have taken the world by storm and so forth. But to see this with 2-year-olds, learning their way around rhythm, and but one of the things is that in addition to that these sounds are their sounds, is that excellence is the goal, and nothing short of excellence is excellent. Work hard, make mistakes, it's okay as long as you're trying, but we won't say that you are excellent until it's excellent. And that comes from a belief that these people who are outside the norm, the traditional norm of accomplishment in classical music, are fully capable of becoming incandescent international stars, or on the level of a good local orchestra, whatever they choose. but they can do it. It's just natural. There's no, this music, you've got to learn some other strange language in order for it to come into your blood. No.
Yes, to pick up on what you said, Candace, and also Tai, this idea of excellence is key, and aspiration and believing in these young people. When London Music Masters was founded in 2008, one of the big goals was that we would work with kids in inner city schools and provide them with progression routes through to places like the National Children's Orchestra and junior conservatoires, and onto kind of other spaces as well beyond that. And it's not that we feel that every child, that's their destination or that's where we should be going, or even that's what we're aiming for. But if we believe that music should be expounded at the very highest level, then that has to be part of our remit. We have to be seeing that some children are kind of making it into that space. And I say amazingly, but perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. But we are seeing that. So we've got our first graduates, our year sixes who are 10 and 11 years old, who are accessing these incredible institutions, and they are incredible, and we should be very proud of them. And they'll be made more incredible by the amazing young people from Lambeth and Westminster who are going to participate there.
To further deal with this cultural, certain things that surprised me. In the portion of the book that I deal with the Symphony Orchestra of the Kimbanguist Church in the Congo, I was looking at a film called Kinshasa Symphony, but I had been to Kinshasa on a research trip some years before, and I'm very aware of Congolese popular music, which is fabulous, just fabulous. And I'm wondering, people making instruments out of templates from, they take apart a bass and then they cut raw wood into it and put it together as a bass. They can't eat, and yet they want to play Beethoven and in their day. That's the song, that's the music that is in their soul, that is taking them to joy, that is taking them beyond all the chaos of their lives. That's what they hear, and so it's their music. In Palestine, when I was in Jenin, the musical store had been firebombed by, they don't know if it was the Israeli Defense Force or was it members of Hamas that didn't like the idea that some Western music was being played and boys and girls together. And I said, well, how do you feel about this? I mean, because everybody involved with the school were very political. Pure BDS and so on and so forth. But the man said to me, we Palestinians love what's beautiful. We love Western classical, we love Oriental, we love rap, we love hip, we love jazz. Just because the Israelis play this music is no reason for us not to. And I thought about the cultural wars that I have been involved with, where it wasn't about really life and death. We talked about it, but it really wasn't there. And everybody here had lost somebody, either through death or incarceration. But the music, the sound, was the thing that took them. They just put all that stuff away, and it was humbling, and something for us in more privileged societies to kind of get over ourselves and just let it happen, get out of the way.
There is it's implicit in the title of this talk that we're talking about classical music. There's a bit of a problem with classical music, because what is this stuff, and why does it have to be so much better than anybody else's music? It doesn't matter where it comes from, but why is classical music, I come from Scotland, why is it better than Scottish folk music? Why is it better than the indie pop that comes out of Glasgow? It isn't. It's just different. And my question about the whole, there is an implicit assumption that goes on. It's a big problem, I think, with some of the way that music education projects have been articulated in Venezuela. For example, and I've commented on this, and I'm happy to be shouted down on all levels of this, but there's a good old-fashioned bit of European cultural imperialism going on there. It's not about contemporary composers. It's not about soloistic creativity. It's about big old orchestras and a repertoire of music by dead white men. Why? There were great Venezuelan folk music traditions who are not financed by the Venezuelan government. Now there are Venezuelan pop musics which are not financed by the Venezuelan government. That's an example of the kinds of choices that governments make, or some people make, when we think about financing this very expensive thing that is classical music. So my question to all of you is, why is classical music better? And are we really better off talking about here a bigger kind of genuinely responsive opportunity-giving music education, as opposed to saying, look, this thing called classical music, which everyone, you know, it's all great stuff, and I like symphonies as much as the next person. I probably like them more than most people. But, you know, yeah, sorry, I'll shut up.
Well, for me, since classical music is what I chose, there's the kind of music that was my music, as you put it earlier. I do not find it better than any other kind of music, but what I do think is very pertinent to say is that in some ways it is still an apprentice art, which is something that has started to disappear from many other things, actually most other things. And so I think in some ways that makes it old-fashioned, not just because we play Beethoven. But I think for classical musicians who are paying attention and who are involved in what they're doing, they realize that it has to be connected from then till now. There has to be a representation of composers that are writing now. In order for it to continue to live on, there has to be living on. But I think the apprentice art part of it is very important, and I think that is what we try to take to the children in the schools. That it's something that they can dedicate themselves to, as opposed to just enjoy, which is very important. They should enjoy it, but there's something very intellectual in it. And I'm not saying that there's nothing intellectual in pop music. I love pop music, and the lyrics to pop songs go as much deep to the soul as many classical pieces can and do. But the specificity of that being such a dedicated apprentice art, I think, is something that shouldn't be lost.
I should probably confess that when I'm not working for London Music Masters, I do work as a pop songwriter, and I'm sending songs to Mexico at the moment, so it's going both ways. But it's another thing to say is that for 4 and 5-year-old children, the music that they learn isn't classical music, it's just music. It doesn't really become classical until, I don't know really, I'm not really sure when that turn happens. And we do, with our kids, we do jazz improvisation, we do a whole range of things, but there's something, I love that phrase, an apprentice art. I haven't really thought about it like that, but I think you're absolutely right. Because because you have this kind of vision of kind of high achievement and certain very difficult things that you have to do on your instrument, it means that when you start from a young age, it has to be good from the beginning. You know, you have to start having a very good posture if you're a violinist, or thinking about your breathing if you're a trumpet player. And these things are foundational. And the amazing thing is that if you get all that stuff right, then you can go off and do whatever you like. I think we'd be amazed to really get to know some of our very good R&B, hip hop, rap musicians, and think about the kind of training they had when they were young, and how much of that had kind of a core, kind of classical, if you like, experience. Because I know lots of my colleagues come from that space, and that whole thing about your music and our music, for the 4-year-olds that we work with, week in, week out, it's just music.
Well, certainly historically, in terms of jazz began to take off in its development after the instinctive musicians from the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. When you get beyond the Louis Armstrongs and so forth, the people who were born in the teens, all of them had formal classical musical educations, and that which helped the music jump. I think, and what is going on in Venezuela, it was that beyond, Abreu very much into Western classical music and wanting to have a Western style orchestra and so forth. And for decades, that was the only emphasis. But his child overtook him, because not everybody needs hundreds of thousands of kids who are coming through this program want to do that. So what has happened is that in popular and folkloric music, the standard of musicianship has just jumped exponentially, because people have gone through this kind of education. And for me, absolutely, I mean, in the book I talk about, so are you going to tell me that Wolf and Goethe and Heine and Schiller and so forth are so much better poets and lyricists than Smokey Robinson and Joni Mitchell and Paul Simon? No. No, I don't believe that at all. You know, and what is, I think, wonderful now is that, you know, and I didn't, you know, Matthew Sharon, I mentioned him, but there are people who are breaking down these barriers, and it's very, very important.
Just conscious of time as well. Just the question of excellence and exclusivity, really. We've had 30, 40 years of outreach projects that all of our institutions, classical and otherwise, have been involved in, precisely trying to engage new audiences and trying to train young people as well. I mean, one of the contradictions of an inclusivity idea is the fact that, just Rob, you alluded to this, that actually, of course, some people are going to be better than others, and if the whole point, if somebody wants to be unified, then it's a question of being better than pretty well anyone else to be able to do. That is absolutely the guide. So the ideology of a kind of inclusivity and every child, well, in fact, that's not either possibly not even desirable at the level of what you want, especially in apprentice culture, to actually all be about. Apprentices about masters and apprentices. Using masters is implicit in the title of the organisation. That kind of virtuosity and that kind of skill development. So how do you deal with the sort of tension between theoretical inclusivity and an actual elitism of practice? Not to say the elitism of opportunity, but an elitism of people being better than each other.
It's a really good question, actually, and it's one of the kind of questions that we need to tackle, because elitism has become a word which we don't like to use, whereas in its best form it's about excellence, and excellence is a great thing, and recognising that in order to achieve at a very high level you have to work very hard. But for me, the question is about how committed are we to developing the innate talent that's within kind of all of our kids, and identifying those children from across our broad communities who have that talent, and then supporting them. Because an organisation like London Music Masters has to exist, because the current structures find it very, very difficult to identify the talent in our inner city schools and then kind of say, these are the options open to you, go for it. It's quite hard to do that because of the barriers which we know about, which are to do with cost, they're to do with culture, they're to do with just availability of resources. So whilst we work with, at the moment, kind of 520 kids every week, a very, very small percentage of those children will be able to achieve at the elite level, and that's absolutely fine, that's normal. We can't all play the violin like Tai. But those, in order to find more children, more potential future performers from these diverse communities, we have to be out there. I'm just spotting one of my teachers, my colleagues there, and she, I don't know actually, we're in the holidays at the moment, but she spent most of this year kind of toiling away in really difficult conditions. Schools are hard, anyone who's a teacher, hands in the air. I know it's really, there we go. It's a really hard thing to do, but you have to put the effort in, and we as institutions have to say we are interested in skill development. It's not just about providing spaces for people to go and enjoy music. Let's believe that they can develop incredible skills and end up on our platforms and amaze us by their musicality.
Oh, thank you. I agree with every single one of those points. And I'd just like to add that I think it's not just that, because we have to provide the support for them, which London Music Masters does in a brilliant way. It gives them the option, and then it supports them through that option. But I think a lot of times children, they go through a period where they're offered something and then it's taken away. So they get to a point where they could get to that next level or take that next step and could be excellent, but they don't have the avenue. And I think a big question is, why don't they have that avenue? For whatever reason, and I'm talking about children of all backgrounds that come from all cultures. So how is it that we fail them in that moment?
Well, let's deal with that then, because in a sense that, you know, take an example of Rob, of the kids from the Bridge Project who are going on to the National Children's Orchestra and then potentially to the conservatoire level. You mentioned this yourself. At the level of schools, at the level of primary school education, even primary school music education that hasn't been blessed by the Bridge Project or In Harmony or everything else, will probably be a relatively diverse environment in which music is going to be made. There won't be perceived to be those kind of barriers. However, when that child then goes to progressively further up the education system, it may well be that they are asking themselves these questions. You know what, my background is very dissimilar to the rest of what this culture is. The colour of my skin is different if you're in an orchestra or an audience or those kinds of things later. What's the potential solution to changing that broader culture, the further up the sort of, well, frankly, just the age and all the other institutions that we're talking about here? Well.
Yeah, it's a really big challenge, and I think it must be said that the conservatoires and the big orchestras are actually, it's not something which they're blind to. This isn't a new idea that's just emerged. You know, this isn't the first conversation of this type, and lots of good work is being done, and I think we should take a moment to applaud that because it's important, and also to say that all of the work that we do on this topic is massively in partnership. We do nothing on our own, and would be much the poorer without our incredible partners. But it's hard. I almost want to hand over to Tai, because one of the amazing things she said when we were just chatting earlier was about the young musicians themselves kind of drawing in kind of their friends and their families, and as we give them the skills, they then become the catalysts and the chief marketers. I think we could improve our marketing and that kind of stuff, but almost, and we're not going to effect this change in the next 5 or 10 years because we haven't invested properly in the young people for them to be joining, you know, the academy in the next 5 or 10 years. But we need to look forward that far so that they are there kind of when we have this conversation again in the future.
It's also, I mean, Candace, you know, the piece that you wrote for the Guardian about this alluded to experiences of feeling not just marginalised, but basically offended, looked at, stared at, just by being in a classical music audience.
I think that those of us who are pioneers are used to being the only one or one of a few. When we kind of look at the environment, we count how many folk are around, and you just keep on stepping. For people who are not used to that, they have to understand that it's you know, there's this whole. It's the 100th anniversary of James Baldwin's birth this year. And back in 1952, he wrote an essay called Stranger in the Village that talked about him being in a small village in Switzerland and how strange it was for the people. And those of us who go places where we're not expected know that this happens, you know, and if you're familiar with it, you know, some are just curiosity, somebody might be hostile. Folks are getting much better with their behavior these days, and they know it's not appropriate to really act out like that. But for the kids who are going into places that they're not used to, you know, they have to be prepared that, you know what? There may not be a whole lot of folks that look like you who came from your neighborhood around, but these people share the same thing. They all want to do the same thing that you want to do. And so think about what joins you. Think about what joins you. And it's hard to think about what joins you when so much in the culture is think about what separates you.
Mm-hmm. You know? Another of the issues around here is the sheerly practical one about money. I mean, again, you've all alluded to this, but actually, you know, the point is this is an expensive business. I mean, I don't know how much your violin costs. I'm sure you play ones that are worth millions of money. Anyway, that's one tip of the economic iceberg that everyone who works in classical music, above all in string playing, is going to have to face. I mean, what are the barriers? Do you all think, and how severe are they in terms of the way that the music education system is set up? Because pathways from a child in a school in Lambeth to end up at the Royal Academy of Music, that will require a lot of support, obviously from LMM and other partner organisations. But if we're realistically saying here, if everyone believes in this room how important music education is and how classical music ought at least to be one of the opportunities that's afforded every child in the country. If you're serious about that, well, that involves billions and billions of investment from. Have we got any representatives of the government here tonight? I'm not sure. Unfortunately, there'll be certain changes at the culture department.
Funny enough, money was part of that too. Never mind. But you know, 45,000 wouldn't have helped that much. Anyway, might have brought a string. I'm rambling. What I mean is, how severe are the economic challenges faced? Because that's the thing that's going to, you know, talking about class, race, and all of those things. I mean, actually, there's poverty involved here.
Right. Well, I would like to say that, first of all, I am an American, so I apologize if anything that I say is slightly insulting at the moment, because I know I'm in the UK. Don't worry. But I can speak from experience to say that I came from a family that worked very hard to get me anywhere close to where I am today. And I'm in the lucky place that I'm being loaned an incredible instrument, being loaned an incredible bow. And for me to get to that point, from wanting to do it to actually being able to do it, I mean, I can't even begin to explain that road, because it started with, of course, being given opportunities or winning opportunities to express myself on stage, yes, of course, but also just being in that place where someone says, okay, you are the person that I will gift this opportunity to, this violin, or this piece of sheet music, or I will give you a CD that you need to listen to. Back to Apprentice Art, learn something. So when we speak about it, it seems very, you know, sort of like clouds in the sky, like, you know, it just sort of dropped and things happened and luck. And no, my family they scraped the bottom of the barrel for me and for all my siblings, and the rest of them are not musicians. But it takes a very extant work on someone's part to make it happen. And a lot of that is financial. But it's just also believing that it's possible, really believing.
I think in terms of family, you know, one of the things that's easily relatable to people is when they look at sports heroes, you know, because it takes, you know, for a tennis player or, you know, what you call an athlete here, or, you know, or football or whatever, everybody has, you know, they have to go through camps. There are roads, there are talent scouting and so forth. There are things available for people who excel. Part of it is that in these communities, which I wrote about, people don't know that some of these things exist. You know, and so you have to get part of something that what London Music Masters is designed to do and needs to do for years and years is guiding people every step of the way, saying, I know you're really ready for a better instrument. So, you know, you need to come. You know, you need to get your parents to bring you over to this place so that you can play, because there are going to be some people there that have some instruments, and maybe you'll get one. And there's a music camp that's over in this part of the country, or is in Switzerland or something. But you know, if you don't know the territory, you don't know that this is how it's done, because almost nobody has this kind of money who wants to become a professional musician. And certainly, most people aren't going to be earning the kind of money to get it. It's all about love, folk.
Yeah, I really agree with both of your comments there. My own story is that my mum was a single mum, and we grew up in a kind of working class context in Coventry, and part of my journey was graduating from the Royal Academy of Music as a trumpet player. But one of the things which I got to get me there was lots of just generosity and gifts from my teachers. So I'd have teachers who would be like, actually, a half an hour trumpet lesson doesn't work for you anymore, you need to do 45 minutes, so I'll give you the extra 15 minutes for free. That kind of thing. And musicians are like that, and it's amazing. My piano teacher didn't change the cost of my piano lessons for 10 years. So I was still paying her £6.50 kind of when I was 18 for my lesson, although she'd risen further us. And there's that kind of generous spirit saying, this is somebody who, you know, has got some potential, let's see what we can give them. And one of the things which is very cost effective actually is investing in our teachers, because our teachers are trained, often, I'm talking about peripatetic teachers, often undertrained, and it's not their own fault, it's because structures aren't there, but they're trained to deliver a certain kind of music education, I would say, and they're not necessarily trained to work within the context which already exists, which are actually not that bad. So the government, for better or worse, is quite committed to wider opportunities, which is this idea that every child has a go at an instrument and plays in a group. That's basically what we do at London Music Masters. We just do it really, really well, and our teachers are very good and been very highly trained. So if we could invest more in training kind of 100, 200, 300 awesome teachers every year who were training out of these academies, then they would go and they'd be the kind of teachers that I had who said, oh, well, here's this extra 15 minutes, because actually it doesn't take that much to identify that talent and then just give it that boost, as you said, to get to the next level, so you can win the scholarships and you can do those things. It just takes someone seeing it and having the skills to push you along a bit further.
Okay, thank you. You've got about 33 minutes, all of you, to quiz the panel. We've thrown up quite a lot of things there. So questions. I'm going to ask you. Well, we've had the benefit of microphones, but I think you've probably benefited too, because I talk too quickly, as you can tell, and would just mumble. None of you would. So if you could just shout your questions or project them to the panel. So questions? Yes, madam.
What do you do to bring parents on board? There's many parents who just don't understand sometimes what you're trying to do. And I know this from my daughter being having the opportunity to do recording, for example, through wider opportunities. She was free in school from the age of 6. By the time she gets to year 6 last year, she was one of only 2 children who continued all the way through to advanced recorder level, because most of the parents could not be bothered to allow their children to practice at home. Some of them actually said, I don't want my child to practice, I hate the sound. And this goes for almost any instrument, because you've got to go through those early stages of the cat's noise that is at home, to actually be able to preserve. So what I want to know is how you bring all these parents on board to explain to them the importance of, it's not just about what we do in a session every week. Those children have to go back home to practice. You have to be there on a daily basis to support them.
Yeah. I think it's a really good question. And my first thought is that I feel that we need to inspire our parents, because their experience of this kind of classical music that we're describing may also be very, very poor. Maybe they don't know that it's valuable, or maybe they do, but I just think that inspiration is really important. If we really believe that this art form is as amazing as we all say it is, then let's be evangelistic about that. Let's draw them to, let's bring them to hear Tai, let's take them to see the LPO, and let's let them catch the bug, so it's something which they want to do and they're passionate about. And let's also not be afraid of saying, okay, so you haven't, no, I don't mean that. Let's not reject people if they come to the party a bit late. So we invite parents to come to all of our after-school lessons, and maybe someone won't come for a couple of years or a few months, but when they do come, they need to feel as welcome as if they'd been there from day one, because we all enter things at different stages, and there shouldn't be judgment about that.
I have a question for Tai.
Sure.
You mentioned at the beginning that there are 2 words that kind of make you feel boxed in and make you feel marginalized. And I'm going to guess that they're a black woman. Could be African American. Very close. So, it made me, I was a little bit worried when I heard you say that music was your escape from that. And when you're dealing with kind of people who don't understand and kind of misjudge, for all of us who are people of color and do anything that's not the stereotype, we're all pioneers, like Candace said. So we kind of have experiences similar to what you describe all the time, every day, as I'm sure you do. And for me, I have to say, and I'm hoping you feel this way, I'm sure that you do feel this way, I absolutely love being a black woman. Knowing everything that I know now, I wouldn't choose anything different every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And when I'm dealing with people who have all these kind of notions, I don't feel the need to escape from it. I feel like I would think that I would go in there, play the music, and be like, I'm going to enjoy myself playing this music, and guess what? You're going to learn when I'm done. Your mind will be expanded when I'm done, and I'm doing you a favor just by me being here. And I just feel like, that's part of the pioneer thing. Like, when I walk into a place I'm not expected, I'm like, everyone is going to be made better because I'm here. I'm honestly American, so I don't it's not something like I don't take on as my problem. It's actually their problem. Well, I really love everything that you're saying. I'm going to help them with that, and that's cool. And we'll all be happy, and that's fine. But it's not my problem, and I don't. Even though I think that, I don't let myself feel marginalized. Even though I know exactly that that is the situation, and still, it doesn't matter to me. Like, they're the ones who are going to grow and learn at the end of it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, let me clarify by saying I don't run away from who I am. And I didn't, and when I say that I immerse myself in my music, when I'm playing my music, I'm not commenting on that. Their commentary and their qualifier of me, you're right, it's about them. But what annoys me is that somehow it's necessary for me to be dragged into the conversation because that's what they see. Because I have never gotten up in the morning and looked in the mirror and said, oh my God, I'm brown. Like, that's never happened to me. All I see is me. So and music for me is like this sacred thing. And when I say sacred, I don't mean classical music or above other music. I just mean music. It's sacred to me. It is a sound, and it's a meaning, and it's an emotion. So the societal junk that gets put on top of my head just because of what I look like is separate to me from what I do with my violin. So that's, and I should have explained that better because I agree with everything that you said, 100%. Mm-hmm.
Let's have Matthew. Your name's already mentioned, right? Matthew Carney, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi. I have a question because I often go to concerts, for instance, the London Jazz Festival, and I see there a fantastically diverse audience, both racially and in terms of age. And whenever I'm there, I think, oh, that's the kind of audience I want to play to. Tomorrow night I'm playing with the City of London Symphony in Christchurch, Spitalfields, and I know I will go out on stage and see a sea of white faces. So how do I get a more culturally diverse audience? Because it really matters to me.
People are so territorial about music. I mean, I'm somebody who goes to classical concerts and to jazz concerts and to world concerts, and I go to dance and I go to opera, and I almost never see the same faces in the same place. You know, if it's the Barbican, when I go to the LSO or some great, symphony classical orchestra, and the next night I go to hear some jazz music, I won't see anybody who's the same. Not even the publicist, the Barbican staff person is the same. People, it's really hard. I mean, so I really think it's young people, and a lot of that, of course, happens online. And, this thing that Gabrielle Prokofiev was doing in terms of bringing, putting stuff out on Facebook and saying, come on down, I think that it will get better. As also, if the musicians who are coming up are encouraged to understand that as a classical musician listening or playing jazz or going to world, they're not polluting their education, and the same on the other side for jazz musicians and so forth who think, oh my God, I'm not going to go there. I'll lose my, I'll lose my groove. I'll lose my cool. In terms of what I produce, I don't know. I think it's people inviting folk. Just, come over here. In the audience. I mean, I know you try, but it's in the audience. Grabbing somebody and saying, you might like this.
It's helpful, Candace, but it's sort of, give us another 20 years. is there anything, Rob, do you think there's anything, Matthew, you can do more immediately? You mentioned something before we came out here was the things we can learn from popular culture. Not populist, but popular culture, and perhaps we should be less afraid to learn some lessons there. I wonder if I can say that.
Yeah. It's really important to note that there are other art forms which are much more diverse and are very similar, and that hip hop's a great example. It's an art form which emerged from kind of a black community, but yet is embraced kind of universally. As a young person who comes from a white working class background, you're not rejected from being involved in hip-hop music, for example. So it can be done, and it can be very well. Jazz is a great example. It's a slightly older art form, and you know, it works really well there. So it's interesting that that hasn't happened with classical music, and it's a bit of an indictment, actually, to the classical music industry that we're not more diverse, and we should be embarrassed about that, and we need to take it seriously because other people are doing it better than we are. Sometimes I think that it's a bit boring. I think that we could communicate a hell of a lot better about this thing that we love, because inherently the music that we love is amazing, but the way we communicate about it, it can be quite dull. Our marketing isn't very good. We're not passionate enough about it to draw people in. Like, we have a responsibility to reach out and say, this is the best thing you've ever heard. Like, you have not seen or heard music or musicians like this. Like, no, I'm telling you, it's incredible. Because it is. You know, I'm also embarrassed by the fact that our musicians don't get paid enough, and that our orchestral musicians aren't really valued. When I heard how much my professor of trumpet at the Royal Academy earned as a principal trumpet at the LSO, I was like, I don't want that job. Because they're not valued by our community. So we need to make it more attractive, and Eugene's got a question.
Yes, there's a question here. It's not a question, it's a response to my friend Matthew. Hello, everyone. Speaker, sorry. It's not a question. It's a comment. It's an assertion and a bit of advice from myself, who I'm known to Robert and Matthew. We've worked together. I perform all kinds of music. I work with all kinds of people, all ages. I work with squirrels as well sometimes, making music. And Matthew's question can be answered by himself and myself and a few of us in combination. The tradition of marketing music and how venues operate is completely outmoded. Some of the most radical stuff is happening online and through the open revolution, where you know the walls of the Royal Festival Hall, for instance, are boring. They're knocked down, and in my view, and they become bridges to other parts of society. So we promote our own concerts, and you play to everybody, and you play where you like to play, and not be reactive to mainstream venues saying, "Oh, come here, this is the kind of music we put on." So the gigs or the venue you were talking about, we can create those ourselves and inspire change. And we'll be chased after by the Royal Festival Halls and the such like, because the real stuff will be happening elsewhere.
And it is happening. I mean, Candace mentioned Gabriel Prokofiev and his non-classical label and management thing. They do great stuff. Yellow Lounge, started in Berlin, doing great stuff in London. It is happening, and it's exciting. And you're right, let's not be afraid to take music beyond the traditional boundaries.
Question here.
This talk is class, race, and classical music. I don't want to be controversial particularly, but the only race that we seem to be talking about is the black. You touched on Venezuela. I just want to point out that if we were now talking about Asia, there is a huge industry of classical music in all Asian countries, and China recently. Now, I'm not going to say why, but I think examining why this question is not relevant. I mean, I sit on juries for music competitions. The number of Asian pianists, if you go around the conservatoires in London and the rest of the country, most of there's a huge percentage of Asian instrumentalists. I'm not going to say why, but I think examining that question and then saying why we're so hung up about why fewer black people is a good question that might help answer.
Candace? I have been thinking about that, and especially because I wrote something in The Guardian. People come to me, you're just talking about black people. Where are the Asians? What about Asians? And this is very unscientific, but I think that the difference is that certainly the explosion in China had to do with the end of the Cultural Revolution and people started picking up on what had been going on in the early part of the 20th century with the classical ensembles, and then you have a phenomenon like Lang Lang, and everybody wants some way up. Japan probably started from the Meiji Revolution in the late 19th century. I don't know what happened in Korea, but what you have in all of these cases is there was never a real question about their civilizations being low, being something dirty, something of the body that wasn't good enough. They didn't have to go through a revolution in terms of attitude of becoming proud of what the value of their music, their arts, their visual arts, any of it. They were very, very centered in terms of that. And for darker people who have been colonized or enslaved, this was part of what was done. The culture was either erased or completely degraded and disrespected. And part of the culture wars that I was very much a part of, because I was a part of the Black Arts movement, I went into and out of it, was saying, you know what? No. We have stuff of value. And and sometimes it went way into the first draft of my senior thesis at Harvard, which was towards the Black aesthetic and visual communications. My first draft of the first chapter completely dismissed the entire Western art tradition, completely. They weren't artists, anything. My advisor read it, and we had a meeting, and he said, you know what? I think maybe we ought to look at this again. But the time was, he was afraid to say anything because we were changing stuff. But this is what we had to fight against. And the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans aren't coming from that place. And they made it's a revolution what they're doing in terms of technique and expressiveness and so forth, but it's different.
I'd also say that the UK context, which is what we're focused on, is quite interesting. So thinking about kind of British Asians or kind of British black young people and how they progress into the conservatoires. There isn't a large number of young British Asians who are in our conservatoires. Diversity in our conservatoires from young British people is extremely low. And the sad thing is, I choose my words carefully because my colleagues here from those organisations work very hard and are doing a great job to change the trend. But over the past 5 years, the proportion of kind of diverse students in those institutions has diminished, which is to all of it's to all of our shames because we all have a role to play in that. But I think there is something to be said about the difference between the UK context, so diversity within the UK, and also people coming from abroad with those skills. Thank you.
One question here, then over there, then the rest of it.
Well, one thing that seems to me is important is to get rid of the intellectual baggage that parents carry, generations carry, and load up on their children. And one way that we found in Element to do that is to get them over the transom. Maybe that it's a traditional place to go to the festival hall, but we found that when we've taken 300 parents into the festival hall to see their children, and the pride they feel in their children, the children feel back, it removes the barrier, it takes away the baggage, and it allows it to start moving forward. So that's one way to start changing your audiences, is get the parents in to see their children. Then the children haven't got the preconceived idea that actually it's not for them, because their parents are starting to think it's for them too. And then they explore the place. But one word I'd love to know what you all think about is transferability, because the skill set that you get as a young musician, whether you take that on to be Tai Murray, or whether it informs the rest of your life and says, I can play the violin to a high standard when I'm 9. I don't want to be a violinist, but that means everything else I do, I'm going to do at that level of excellence because it's already inside me. I just wanted to know what you think of transferability.
I think it's very important, and I think it's something that is definitely true and happens. I know for myself and for my siblings, I mean, I turned out to be the only musician in the family. My brother, who's 2 years younger than I am, studied violin for a very short time when he was young, decided that was not his thing. However, the level of intellectual thought process that he took from it, he's now just past the bar. I mean, and this is something that I know that the detailed amount of thought, the attention to detail, and just believing that it's worth it to work hard at something has informed what he does. It's informed what I do. I mean, I graduated from Indiana University when I was 18 years old, almost full bachelor's degree. Decided not to finish it because music was my thing. Went on to Juilliard instead. But it was because I'd spent so much time in an intellectual pursuit that it was easy for me to pick up a book, write an essay, study, learn things, memorize things. It just became second nature. And I think that's also something that I'm sure that you tell parents, but I think it's hard for them to believe sometimes. But they can. And I also agree that we shouldn't punish them for maybe not being there immediately at the beginning. But I think it's something that they can recognize in their own children, and they can see that it will inform other parts of their lives, their children's lives.
You also know the research, LMR's research, indeed other backed up by other data from other organisations that attainment in school in general, whether it's in Harmony or whether it's the Bridge Project, goes out across the board in schools in which music is a dominant part of education. That's just a fact. That's simple. Question over there.
I just wanted to return to the thing Rob had about where we're losing young teenagers in particular from classical music. I'm the director of one of the junior conservatoires that we've been talking a lot about, and like my colleagues, we've been auditioning hundreds of applicants over the last few weeks for places for September, and actually I've been really heartened by the diversity that I have seen, and I'm sure that we're going to increasingly see the work that Element is doing at that end coming towards us, so I think that's a positive. But one of the things that has saddened me, and I wanted to just see what the panel felt, I heard time and time again from students from state schools and, without labelling, from deprived areas, was when I asked them about music in their school, the clear message that was coming out was not that there wasn't music going on in the school, but there was a lack of imagination and role models and leadership. It wasn't a slight on the teachers, it was a slight on the fact that within their peers there was that lack of imagination and leadership. And I would suggest and wonder what the panel felt, that this was the real crux of the matter, that particularly in lower teenage years, the work that LMM does in primary schools is fantastic, but the disconnect is happening at the early teenage years.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think you were right about needing to have a peer group. One of the reasons why me and my mates
were all excellent at what we did at secondary school was because we all there was a group of us, there were 6 or 7 of us who just enjoyed kind of being good and having fun in that, and it's hard to do. Things like National Children's Orchestra, the spaces that you create on a Saturday, I think can be part of that solution, because you might not find a peer in your classroom, but you will find a peer on your summer holiday course. So I think that is definitely part of the solution.
But it's also for us to go out into communities too, and I do spend time. I spent last Sunday in Leytonstone with groups of children and parents, talking to parents, and it's a way of giving back. We've had the privilege of, some of us, of being allowed to have a musical education, and my parents were refugees, so they came to this country with nothing. And we had little money, and I was very lucky to be picked up at school. So I feel obliged to go back into the community to help others along. And I think it should be part of the musician's sort of remit. Should be part of our portfolio to go back into the communities, to inspire in the way that we have been inspired to be where we are today. And so, I always urge that people think about it a bit more, because then if you go out into those communities, then those communities will come back to you. They will see you play. You will invite them back to your area, and they'll know who you are. I know that person. I took somebody to see a friend of mine called Melanie Marshall when she was performing in Fella, the musical. She'd had a lead role. It was at the National Theatre, and I took 2 sort of black families with me because she let me have some free tickets. And it was very interesting. And it was a very cultural show. I learned a lot about the history of Africa. But it was so moving for these children to find out where their roots were. And, you know, the parents were so pleased that they had come to see this. I thought, well, it is about connecting. It's about joining the dots for people. That we have a role of all of us to play to help people join the dots and not leave people without that education. It's about education and knowledge and passing on our knowledge that we have so that people have the choice. It's about choice as well. Not everybody has to become a musician. Not everybody has to become an engine driver. But what we have to have is that choice. And that's the thing that's sort of lacking.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Question?
I think it's more of a general comment. I'm Hannah Kendall, I'm a composer and I also work at London Music Masters, and I'm just so happy that this discussion is happening this evening because we spend our days talking about this in the office, and it's so great that we're able to bring it to this open platform. And actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to try and encourage the practicing musicians in this room to comment. Actually, people who are my age, of our generation, who are coming up through the music industry, because we'd love to hear your comments as well. Even though, as Rob says, our colleagues in the industry are doing fantastic things, I think it would be great to hear from practicing musicians as well. I think what Victoria said actually hit the nail on the head for me in particular, and Tom, you mentioned as well, is that you asked why is classical music better, or what's so great about classical music. What's so great about classical music is all the studies have shown all the benefits that young children get from participating in classical music from an early age. But why should that just be ring-fenced for children or children's parents who can afford it? That's what the issue is. Classical music brings out all these extra benefits as well, academic, in addition to being able to play or write well, and that shouldn't just be for a certain class of society. But also, it is about perception as well, and we have touched on that. I have a very English-sounding name, Hannah Kendall, but I'm tired of going to meetings and people coming to meet me and going to a white person who might be sitting next to me. Because I, of course, Hannah Kendall, a composer, could not be from an ethnic minority. Absolutely not. Obviously not. I don't know why. So it's perception at our level as well, and I think it's almost educating people, adults as well, because as you say, we don't want to wait a whole generation for things to change. And also, we have had fantastic, brilliant education facilities from orchestras and organisations since the 80s, and there hasn't been much change. I don't know the answer, but I'd love to know why. And I really do believe that the things that we're doing at London Music Masters and all of the organisations at the moment, we are doing great things. How do we ensure that it's definitely changing for the next generation?
A question to the panel, actually. Off the back of what the gentleman over there with the glasses and the gentleman to my right said, in Asian society, there's a great culture of music and music schools, and also increasing diversity. Isn't it? I feel personally, I'm a composer. Is it more of a question of what's the bigger disconnect? Is it the race or is it the class? I know and I believe that it's more to do with class rather than race, especially nowadays, and in the UK especially, and in Europe.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that you hit on a very good point. But as someone coming from America, I can say it's the opposite in America. It has more to do with race than it does with class. And it just so happens that people of a certain race are of a lower class. So it's connected still, of course. But I think it's still, speaking from personal experience, I have literally walked out on stage and heard people gasp because they're just like, oh my God, what? Like, who just walked out? You know, and that says a lot. And that has nothing to do with class, because I'm sure I look great. That's how I look when I go on stage. You see what I'm saying? But they are just so shocked. And it's not even that all of them are just like, oh my God, she shouldn't be there. It's that they just are so shocked that it is me. You know, and so and so I think that perhaps in the UK it might be reversed a little bit. I mean,
I'd say that in the UK, my sense is that class is very important, and a big question is, what do kind of middle class black families want for their children? I don't think it's a career in music, to be honest. You know, universities are actually full of really diverse populations. Universities are doing quite well. Kind of 20% or so of the first year student makeup last year came from diverse communities, which represents, is similar to what's in the general population. But most of them go to law and medicine because that's something which they're passionate about and interested in, and perhaps that their first generation parents, like my dad, you know, wanted for their kids. So a really important question is, where are kind of the middle class black kids, for want of a better phrase, in our conservatoires, and what are we doing to say to them, actually, this is the most entrepreneurial, exciting, life-changing, stimulating way of spending your years?
Thank you. Look, we've got 3 minutes left. 3 very brief questions and comments. I'm afraid it's in the middle. Just, sorry over there. Oh, right, Chi wants to say that. Okay, can we just have this gentleman in the front row?
One of the reasons I left my last school was because when I asked my friend why he did music, he said, my parents said so. How do you think this affects musicianship if they're not given the choice? They said, right, here's a violin, go. What do you think on that, and how do you think it affects musicianship as a whole?
That's a very short time.
Would you like? Okay. Well, that's a very good question. And I think that speaks to a little bit, we were talking a little bit about the difference between just transferability, or are you going to be a musician? And for people who are going to be musicians, I think a lot of them would say it was very clear for them. They loved it, they wanted to do it. And for people who are just, you know, just go play the violin, you know, that's someone's parent giving them something good to do. Just like you tell a child, go read a book. You know, you eat your greens. It's all the same thing. You know, it's about just giving a child something good to do with their mind intellectually. And yes, a child that is just given it may or may not become a musician. And that is just fine. You know, that's fine. So yeah, but that was a great question. Yeah.
We'll be around a bit more time.
I just wanted to respond to somebody who said, how do you get a more diverse audience to his concerts? Because this is actually quite well-trodden ground in relation to theatre, Shakespeare, novels, poetry. And I think that the way you get a more diverse audience is you signal to diverse audiences that this might be for them. And first of all, we get people over the threshold. And the thing about having children play and their parents come, that's really important. Secondly, you look at how you market what you're doing. Because very often, I go to things which people I know, who are not regular classical music goers, would love to go to, they've not heard about it. So I think some of these venues need to think about how they market stuff. It's also about your programming. I think, and I think above all, it's about the people that run the venues thinking, understanding that a diverse audience will just not happen. They have to make a priority. And I'm not suggesting that they don't program classical music, but the theatres I know in London that have managed to attract a diverse crowd, you know, because once people get accustomed to coming to your venue for A, they will come to it for B. So it's how you market, it's how you program, and it's the signals you give to say to people, actually, this might be for you. And are middle-class parents, black parents, interested in their children to become a musician? I think I can count myself a middle-class black parent. I would love my son to become a classical musician. He wasn't that interested.
One very quick note that I was thinking about in terms of is that they don't do it quite as much here as they do in the States, but if there's a show, Broadway show, that's kind of middling in terms of critical response, that's not going to drive people in. They have a camera outside getting the people to talk about how much they loved the show. Now, the BBC Proms never does anything like that because, of course, everybody's going to buy all these tickets anyway. But if they either asked people of color who were there or, God forbid, brought some in, not to the kids program, not to the Doctor Who, to some real hardcore classical music thing, and then afterwards they had a man on the street, well, what did you think? And then broadcast it. Oh gosh, this person, that person is kind of like me, maybe I'll go there. I mean, it's just simple, basic things that I think classical music has thought has been below that.
There are some people from the proms here tonight who will be responsible for broadcasting, so thank you, Candace.
Another specific suggestion arising out of this diversity of audience point is that Howard Goodall is saying that classical music is not just written by dead white men, but has morphed into film music. And I wonder if we couldn't exploit more the film music in both our concert programs and our teaching programs and so on to actually encourage a more diverse audience and a more diverse range of people.
Can I just add an example to that very thing of someone from my own personal experience who, when I sort of were talking about it, doesn't matter what, and he said, what? That thing tune from the Lone Ranger, that's classical music? And the advert for a few years ago for Hamlet cigars. People did not realise it's classical music.
Thank you. The question here then, Chichi. Thank you.
I was having a discussion. I just wanted to take from Rob's point. A lot of people from migrant communities that come to London are very big on having their children go into specific roles in university. They're lead roles: lawyer, engineer, architect, doctor. A lot of that has to do with respectability, but if you talk to most people from migrant communities on the street about classical music, you hear so much about respectability that it becomes almost about snobbery. So it's not that classical music lacks any respectability in that sense. What is it you think that stops people from migrant communities, especially people from communities with massive musical histories like Indian music, Asian music, West African music have massive musical histories, like especially from what I think it was Tai was saying, the kind of discipleship thing. With a lot of the Indian stringed instrument players and the Senegalese stringed instrument players, they have massive, long histories of this kind of discipleship music. Where do you feel, it's a question to kind of everyone on the panel, where do you feel the disconnect comes from when these cultures have those histories, those unique kind of histories in their own context and are able to recognise that classical music is respectable? Why do they not then make the link between that and the lead kind of subjects?
Thank you. Thanks.
I think that's pretty much the question at the heart of this conversation, and well done, Dan, who's my brother, who articulated that very well. I'm very proud. And I just very briefly, I think Diane hit the nail on the head when she talked about signals and the kind of signals we want to give out to attract diverse communities. I think if we're concerned that the diverse communities aren't coming to our stuff, then we should perhaps think about the signals that we're giving out which are putting them off.
Oh, and in terms of this, I mean, I think it's just a very classic thing. John Adams, the second president of the United States, said that, you know, I'm a farmer, my son is a lawyer, so my grandson can be an artist. I mean, it's the normal pattern. You know, my grandparents were Jamaican immigrants. If my mother had lived, she died when I was 12, I mean, it would have been a knockdown, drag-out fight for me to have gone into the arts as opposed to going into a profession. My father's family, I'm fifth generation university-educated woman, it was fine at that point. But this is just the normal thing that happens, and you have to understand that.
When I first started playing music, we lived in the little village in Kent. I was hammering away at the keyboard, and I didn't know it was called classical music. I just knew that this thing I liked, and I just got on with it. And I didn't have role models. I had no one that looked like me, and it was just something that I did. And I'm the first of 5 kids, and no one in my family knew anything about what I was into, but they were wonderful musicians in their own way. That's that subject. And then I think I knew it was called classical music when I did my O-levels or something. I was taken to a concert by my school. And I'm concerned by the thing one of the reasons why I think people think that classical music is somehow better, and one reason why I think we put people off is that we walk onto a stage and we immediately put our heads into a book of some sort. Unlike any other kind of music genre, people come on stage and they immediately physically engage with their audience, and they bring people in. You see people's partings most of the time, and it looks really cerebral. And so if people don't know about it or don't read music, they think, gosh, I don't understand, because they're intimidated by that, I think. I think that's an issue. I don't think, I mean, I could not have played Beethoven's 7th Symphony and Schubert's 9th Symphony last night at the Royal Festival Hall without my music. I had to do that. But it's my job, I think it's our job as classical musicians to play out beyond our music stands, and we've got to work harder at communicating. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, just briefly, the word diversity. I would love to find a better word, because every time I know we all know what it means, what we say, what we think it means, but I think it's kind of it's sort of putting everybody in different places, rather than, can we find another word that means inclusive, that brings us all together, rather than diversity? I would love to find another word.
There's a question over here. Yeah, thanks.
As a practicing musician and a teacher, I feel like this is a comment and something that I've been formulating listening to you all, but I'm finding myself half counsellor, half teacher, in the sense that they've come in and you may be working on something but their mind's somewhere else. So there's sort of two journeys in my professional life and as a composer and a writer. Sometimes it feels like, I've got a clear focus, there's something I'm practicing, there's something I have to do. And then there's the where's my mind at, what do I bring on stage, what do I bring into my teaching space, what do my students bring in? So it's like learning how to become, a better human as well as a better musician. But the two things are really important, because if you're not in a positive headspace and you're coming in, you're approaching the music, you're frustrated, there's a standard of excellence, you're not even sure how far that is. The better you get, the further away it might seem. So there's sort of varying standard of excellence, and then there's where your mind is at in relation to that, because you may be there, but you may actually be thinking that you're somewhere else. So I don't know, in an educational sense, what's being done to help teachers take into account becoming counsellors as well as musicians.
There's not enough clearly more is what is that, right? But I mean, clearly, this is about relationship. The teacher, you make the point that teacher.
Yeah, and I would also say that we need to elevate the art of teaching and celebrate our teachers and respect them more, our music teachers, because what they do is incredible, and they need the training, they need the support, and they need kind of the adulation, because what they do is extremely special. Yes. Is that an answer?
It's more in the sense that if the belief that Tai was talking about, if you don't have the belief, whatever it is, regardless of being a musician or not, that's really fundamental to anything in life. If your motivation is low and you don't believe in anything, you're not going to get to where it is you'd like to get to. So on all levels, outside of music as well, how we teach that sense of belief, and tying in with what Candace was saying about having to fight against, people's perceptions, that's all belief, that's all self-belief. I'm used to that being that one person in the room. I don't think about, why am I the one person in the room, because quite frankly my mind's in a different space. It doesn't matter. So learning how to become self-confident really is what we're talking about, because that informs everything else.
I think just briefly before Tai steps in, I think we all have a responsibility to speak extremely positively to our young people and to tell them, to confer that sense of self-belief to them and tell them that they are amazing, because frankly, they are. So we can all do something about that tomorrow.
Very quickly, this is something, my mother's a school teacher, and she's taught all of the grades from small to pretty large children, and but at the moment she has a group of children that are 8 and 9 years old, and she's teaching them how to read, because they have gotten this old and they do not know how to read, and she, and And she talks to me about that sort of weird relationship between I have to teach them something, but I also represent something to them because for whatever reason they're not getting it somewhere else, or they're in many of these children are in terrible places. And what she tells me that she tells them is very simple. I respect you as a student, and you need to respect me, but you need to expect something from me. As your teacher, I'm not here to be your friend. And if a teacher is there to be your friend, they're not teaching you. They're trying to be your friend. I'm here to teach you how to read, and once you know how to read, then you'll be on your way. So you expect yourself to be able to read, and I will expect you to be able to read. And once we've done that together, problem solved. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to somehow diminish what you're saying, because I think it's very important. But I think that is her way of sort of combating what she cannot fulfill for everyone. She's there to do a very specific job, and she does it very well.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've all been part of this conversation. One final question. Who wants to ask the question? No pressure. That's going to tie the room together. That's going to do everything. This is going to be the question. I have a choice of two hands there. I can see your face, the guy with the white top on.
We do have a working class music in this country, and that's the brass band heritage, which I feel very passionately about, and I think it's very important, and it doesn't get the support that it deserves. I grew up in a brass band family, and if it wasn't for brass bands, I wouldn't be doing music now. I started from age 6. I was taught by my grandparents. I played next to my mum in the band. I went to tube school in music. I went on to music college, and the rest is history. And I think it's really important because they're not based in schools. They have links with the community. They do most of this for free. They get no money from the Arts Council at all, and it is fundamentally a working class pursuit, or at least it was. I mean, we're talking about diversity. I'll admit it's not that diverse, but it is more diverse than it ever was.
Inspire your young children, inspire them to know that they have within themselves something which is inherently valuable.
I do follow what Rob said. I think that's very important. And also I think just to tell them that they have something within themselves, that what they have within themselves is special. What their love for something or their wish to do something is valid. I think that's something we have to, because there are many negative things that are reinforced over and over and over again. And I think we can, along with those, we can reinforce the positive too. So I think that just is important, the reinforcing of the positive.
I think absolutely the parents, but in a lot of, and I know in the Kumba that there are parents who are present, but sometimes you're dealing with people who come from very chaotic backgrounds, and you just have to say, you have it. You must believe in yourself. Okay, you're 10 years old, but you know it has been on you already, and you just go out and believe that you can do. I know you can do it. You can do it. Just hold on to that.
That was pretty good. That was just fun. Look, thank you all of you. This feels like an upbeat to a conversation which I know and hope will keep running throughout all of your institutions, wherever you've come from to be with us tonight. Thanks to you all for being here. Thanks to London Music Masters. Thanks to the English Speaking Union. Thank you, of course, to Candace Allen, to Tai Murray, and to Rob. Thank you very much indeed.